So, like the title of the video says, we're going to be changing it up a little bit right now, and we're going to be looking at wolcen. I would like to put a disclaimer on this. A lot of people are very angry about this game. It does have a lot of bugs. A lot of people feel like they got swindled, etc., etc. I personally don't feel this way. I have really enjoyed the game so far. It does have a lot of bugs. I'm a fairly patient person and I like testing and playing around with stuff. I love ARPGs in general. So I will say that I have personally gotten a lot out of this game. It's been a lot of fun for me. I understand a lot of people are having issues with it, so this is really not the place to flame me or this content or anything. This is going to be a purely informational video. If you don't want to watch it, please do not watch it. But if you guys want to know how ailments work, if you guys want to know the inner workings of everything dot related in this game, stick around because wolcen is probably the most complicated dot system I have ever seen in a game, and I love it. So let's go ahead and jump in. So the first thing that I would like to start off with is let's compare dot systems to other games. Let's start off with something like everybody probably knows, World of Warcraft. You'll have an ability that maybe deals damage up front, or even not sometimes, and then it'll have a set amount of damage over time. And it'll actually outright say, hey, you deal X damage over 30 seconds, or something similar to that. And then you have games like Path of Exile where it's a little bit more complicated, and you have some things based on other things. So, for instance, if you're a warlock and you build a bunch of crit, you actually have the ability to make your dots critically hit. Or you build haste and it makes your dots tick faster. In Path of Exile, you generally have the ability to either make something tick faster, or if you hit harder with an ability, it will actually have a bigger dot on it. So if you have like a crit build, it can actually become a bigger, more dangerous burn or bleed or, what have you. So keeping that in mind and keeping it contrasted with how wolcen works, wolcen is quite a bit more complicated than that. And let's go ahead and get into why. So the first thing that you kind of have to know about wolcen is the fact that we have a lot of different ailment types. Now, of our ailment types, and I'm going to go ahead and scroll down to them, we can see there are quite a few ailment types. All of these do a different thing. So if you are physical, you have a chance to stun. If you're poison, you have a chance to put a toxic proc on the enemy that deals damage over time. Bleed, very similarly, damage over time. Burn, damage over time. Freeze is a CC. Shock is a damage over time. And stasis is kind of like a slow. Think of it as sort of almost like time magic kind of thing. It kind of stacks up and it becomes more and more effective. Additionally, we have weakness. That decreases the amount of damage that an enemy may deal, and then curse increases the amount of damage that an enemy can take. Now, I will say freeze and stasis are both very strong defensive statuses. This will not be covering most of these other statuses. Weakness is also very effective for making enemies just deal less damage. It can be very effective with builds that don't have 100% immunity or very close, even after some of the bug fixes in the game. The only real ailment that we care about that doesn't directly deal damage is going to be curse, and that is because curse actually makes an enemy take more damage. So we see here, if you have one stack, it's 5% less or 5% more, and 34% at maximum stacks. Now, all of that being said, we have four main abilities that we want to look at: poison, bleed, burn, and shock. Now, the first thing that you have to realize is that not all procs are made the same. In fact, none of them are made the same, and some of them are outright better than others. That won't super matter once we get into why we want all of them. But let's go ahead and go over how they're different. So poison ticks every 0.9 seconds and it lasts for 5 seconds. So the first thing you're going to notice about that is the fact that they do not evenly divide into each other. All of the other dots do. 0.5 seconds into 2.5 seconds for bleed, for instance. So the poison proc actually has kind of an odd amount of time that it lasts. Now, at first I thought maybe that was going to cut the amount of damage that the last tick deals, or maybe the first tick. That is actually not true. Poison ticks 6 times for full amounts of damage every single time. What that means is while poison is the slowest, or almost the slowest of all the dots, it actually has the highest amount of damage per stack. So if you just apply 10 stacks of poison and 10 stacks of bleed, you'll actually end up dealing more damage with poison than you would with bleed. Now jumping into bleed, bleed has its own little caveat. It is the fastest ticking status. So what that also means is it has the highest DPS, but also the highest maintenance cost. So poison you can kind of leave on for a while. Bleed you're going to have to apply twice as often as a poison, because at its bleed duration of 2.5 seconds, it just falls off much quicker. Now, burn is very similar to bleed. It ticks very fast, not quite as fast as bleed. It only ticks 5 times, which is the same as bleed. Poison is 6. Now, bleed and poison are both single target though. Burn actually applies an ignition to a target, and they kind of pulsate fire damage continuously to all enemies around them. So burn is a really good AoE dot. Now coming to shock. Shock is pretty much far and away the worst dot damage type. Shock deals electrical damage, which most enemies in this game don't seem to have a lot of resistances. I have noticed some kind of do actually, but for the most part, all of the ailments will be performing very similarly. So shock, the first thing we can notice is the fact that A, it has the slowest tick rate of all the dots. It's even slower than poison, which is kind of unfortunate, and its duration of 4 seconds also means that it doesn't last for 6 ticks. It actually only lasts for 4. So it is the slowest ticking dot, as well it has the fewest ticks. Now, once we get into sort of a little bit more information, you're going to see why this is even worse than you might guess, and that is if you look at these damage amounts, they're very similar. And that's actually because they all have the exact same base ailment damage. All ailments in the game that deal damage have a base amount of damage that they use. So what that kind of ends up meaning is all of them scale exactly the same, except for the fact that they have different intrinsic properties. Poison's the highest damage per stack, bleed's the fastest DPS, and burn has a nice AoE. Now, shock is the worst in pretty much every category, except for the fact that we still want shock. So one of the biggest limiting factors, and one of the ways that ailment damage works, is the fact that we can actually apply every type of ailment to the same enemy at the same time. It's not like we have a bleed, therefore we can't have a burn. We can have it all. We can have poison, bleed, burn, and shock on a target all at the same time. So then our limiting factor becomes the number of stacks. So if we hit our maximum number of stacks of poison, you need to apply bleeding. If you hit the maximum bleeds, you need to apply burn. And if you hit those 3, then yeah, you should probably start applying shock. So just keep in mind you are going to want all 4 of them, but shock is the least important of the 4. So now that we kind of have that out of the way, now let's go ahead and take a peek at what our ailment damage really is. So what I want to do is we're actually going to look at the amount of ailment damage we have here. So it's 205 to 6156, right? So we have that value. If I actually come in here and I just start unequipping everything, make sure, why won't that come off? Okay, there we go. I think that's like a server bug or something. But yeah, so we've taken everything off. We still have a lot of wisdom and a decent amount of ferocity. So what I'm going to have to do now is I'm actually going to have to reset my attributes to get rid of some of that. So let me go ahead and come in here. We can see that our damage has lowered pretty substantially, and they've all become the exact same amount. So if I go ahead and reset my attributes, which this will be the last of my gold, I've been resetting and testing for a while now. Let's go ahead and do that. So we're going to see that we have some burn damage, some bleed damage. It's 76 to 2288, and this still isn't our base. So we actually have a bunch of passives that we have applied right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm also going to reset my passives. So now that we've done that, now we can see our true base ailment damage. So this base ailment damage for my level, and we'll talk about that in a second, is 27 to 270. So an interesting thing about this is that it is the same for all damage types. However, it is not the same for all levels. When you level up, this can go up. I think at level 1 it starts at 2 damage, and then that can go to 20 damage. What that implies is 10 stacks. So when I have poison damage, I do 27 damage per poison tick. So if I apply 10 poisons to an enemy, now I'm doing 270 per tick. So just keep in mind the base default value for all of these is multiplied by 10 on the right side. Now we can increase that, and there are numerous ways to increase ailment damage, but most of them aren't as obvious as it might appear. So an interesting thing that you can do is, you see this 27 to 270? Let's go ahead and throw on my weapon. So if you notice, my weapon has physical damage, toxic damage, and then it has rend damage added to spells. So if I throw this on, we can actually see it moved, but none of our statuses actually changed. Why is that? Well, ailment damage is actually not based on almost any type of damage that says to something. So if we actually look at a weapon, most of these stats that you actually see here, material, elemental, and occult, those, if you actually look down, it says physical damage on attacks, toxic damage on attacks. Anything that says on attack or to a spell, added to projectiles, none of that actually goes to your ailment damage. And this was really confusing to me at first. I couldn't figure out how it was working. And basically the way it works is this. Ailment damage really only increases a few ways. It increases if the enemy takes more damage from things like, for instance, the curse or certain abilities that make enemies take more ailment damage or more damage in general. That's where you're going to get into some of your utility spells where you're bringing something along just to make an enemy take more damage. Which is pretty neat, but it's not one of the main ways we scale, so I'll leave that up to you guys to find. I'll just say, Mark of Impurity is really good, and Cursing is really good as well. So you can put those two together if you would like. Now, the other way is increasing your damage, and I know it's confusing because I said you just can't increase damage. It says, 2 spells or 2 attacks and stuff. Anything in the game that just says damage will work. So looking at our skill tree, for instance, there are nodes like this one right here where it just says 8% damage. If that is true, it applies to ground effects, projectiles, spells, and ailments. Anything that just says damage will increase our ailment damage. Now, additionally, anything that outright says ailment damage obviously increases our ailment damage, so both of those would apply. Now, when we see 12%, we think maybe that's pretty good, right? However, a lot of these flat damage increases aren't nearly as good as they might look on paper, and that is because of diminishing returns. So if we take a look at some of our stats here, we actually see that our damage at its base is 27 to 270. In case you guys don't know this yet, and I'll kind of go over it briefly, you have 4 main stats. Each one of them is broken down into their rank. So you have primary, secondary, tertiary, and quaternary. Now, for those, your primary stat will give you 0.5% of damage per point. So if I put in 2 points, that is 1% damage. Now, if I put 2 points in my secondary skill, it actually only gives me 0.4% per level. And then the same is with tertiary, it's 0.3. And then finally with your quaternary, it is 0.2 per level. So what does that kind of mean? This is where you kind of see people in forums and all of your meme builds where they just want to release stuff quickly so it gets as many views as possible, and they haven't looked really, and I'm not calling anybody out, but it's sort of a problem in that people are looking at this and saying, yeah, you just dump everything into wisdom. It's the most efficient thing you can do. It just makes perfect sense, and they have a little bit of a point. It's kind of true that it does indeed increase faster. However, if I were to increase, say, wisdom, and agility, and I were to go all the way up. So, oh, and as an aside, I know this is not what this video is about, but there are actual ways. Oh, sorry. There are actual ways to get your stats faster. So if you just left click and right, or left click either side, you go up by 1. If you hold down Shift, you'll actually go up by 5. If you hold down Control when you click, you'll go up by 50. So I thought that was pretty cool when I found it out, and I hope it helps you guys. But anyway, so I dumped everything into Wisdom here, and you can see that my damage percentage is 340. Now that, it looks really high, and it is. It's pretty high. And if we dumped it into Ferocity, you're going to actually see that if I dump some points into Ferocity, it does go down. So yes, I did lose 5% there, right? And yeah, but that's also with 50 points invested. So I went from 340. If I throw, quite a few points at Ferocity, I come down to 320. So I lost 20% damage. And yeah, 20% damage is, a decent chunk, but remember, it's diminished returns. You're talking about 20% out of 340, not 20% out of 100. But what you can additionally see is the fact that our ferocity went from 5% to 10%. So that 20% damage is not even necessarily the whole story here. If I increase my crit, do I have a way to use that? And they actually just fixed Primordial Insight, which we'll talk about in a minute. So yeah, my ferocity is actually probably going to more than make up for that 20% flat damage loss. Additionally, what it also will do is if we take a look at our nodes on our tree, things like ailment damage, or just flat damage, these nodes, they get added in together with that amount from our attributes. So what that means is this 12% isn't 12% out of, 0%. It's 12% on top of 340%. So, diminishing return wise, you're really almost talking about like a 2 or 3% damage increase, not a 12%. So keep that in mind when you're taking nodes, and also when you're putting points into your attributes. The more you load up one stat in particular, the more diminishing returns you're going to get anyway. So you're going to lose bonuses from your skill tree, and some of those might get offset by default. So in any case, I'm not saying that everybody that does it is stupid or wrong or anything like that. What I'm saying is it's not the whole story, and please diversify your builds. I'm not saying, put points into your quaternary skill, because your quaternary skill is worth very little. It's only worth 0.2. So that 0.2, yeah, you probably don't want to invest in that. But remember, your let me go ahead and dial these back down. Your other stat is worth 0.4. Your secondary stat is worth 0.4. Your main stat's worth 0.5. That means you're losing 0.1% damage per point you put in your secondary stat. That's really not going to be that much in the end game. It's really not going to be that much if you're pumping up your crit chance to a decent amount, or your attack speed to a decent amount, or even, if you have a tank build that relies on blocking, or, things like that, and you need to be tanky, you're not allowed to, take a lot of damage. Toughness can help too. So I just want to throw that out and make people realize that, yeah, you can dump everything into one stat, and this flat damage is really important for ailments and for crit and for everything else, but it is not the be-all end-all to just dump everything into one stat. I think it's a mistake, and I think it hurts build diversity. So in any case, getting away from the flat damage increases and the fact that our skill tree is going to have quite a bit of diminishing returns just because these percentages get so high, let's go ahead and talk about the other ways that we can scale it. So besides our flat damage increases that we get from attributes and from our skill tree, we can also scale it with things like enemies taking more damage. That's like our curses. And there's two additional ways to do it. We can also do it with stacks. So stacks are the multiplication of 10. So burns can stack 10 times, bleeds can stack 10 times, etc., etc. Now, on the skill tree itself, there are a set of nodes. There are two sets of nodes. They have the same name as each other in each set. So you have Master of Curses and Master of Curses. These increase your ailment stack limit to 20. So this is going to be really, really huge for all ailments. It increases the amount that you can do for curses, for weakness, and for damage. It increases all of the stacks. It's very, very strong. And if you're doing an ailment damage build, which sometimes you can do an ailment build for like crit instead, but if you're doing an outright dot build, you're gonna need to have these ailment stacks. And we can talk about a kind of design methodology for your core builds, and I can give you guys like a really good beginner cookie cutter setup that I use, and I think it's really, really strong. So the most important thing probably to scale your damage are these stacks. You're going to want to increase your stacks. The other set is over here in the Time Weaver tree. Now, these aren't going to be probably oriented this way for you. This is how I would recommend you orient them. You can actually save a little bit of nodes a little bit if you don't want to go crit if you rotate this one more, but we won't worry about that for right this second. But yeah, these +5 max ailment stacks here and here, that's going to take you all the way up to 30. So you have 10, 15, 20, 25, 30. Those are really, really important for scaling your damage. On top of that, though, you are going to need a way to apply those stacks because it's going to take forever. So you definitely need to go into Insidious Decay, and you definitely need to go into Power of the First Men. Now, that being said, at this point, you probably want to get absolutely all of the major nodes in Kabbalist. So all of these big ones, you're gonna want to get all of them, and a lot of the minor ones too. So now that we kind of have that out of the way, we have the stack set up. Now we also have Primordial Insights. That's this Kabbalist node right here. Ailment stacks inflicted with critical hits can deal critical damage. Damage over time triggered with critical hits deals critical damage. So what's important about this is that if you crit with an ability, that ailment will crit the entire duration it is up. It isn't just a chance. If you crit with an ability or a skill and it applies an ailment, that ailment will always critically hit. Now, here's the sad part. It is really strong. It doubles your damage. So crits are double damage. However, they do not seem to, at least in this current patch right after they fixed it, so keep in mind this is a point in time, they do not scale with critical damage. And to show you the extent of what I have tested with, I have tested with the Merciless Lethality setup, which is 60% increased critical damage. I have used the minor nodes for critical damage up here. I have used both my main weapon for critical damage and my catalyst for critical damage. Additionally, I have used a skill that has critical damage on it. Actually, two skills, because my Solar Fall also has, where is it? Right there, critical damage. I have not gotten the critical damage portion to scale. It may be a bug, it may not. I hope it's not a bug, actually, because I think it might be a little too strong if they allow people to go crit and ailment. It's just a little bit too much multiplicative power, in my opinion. Now, that being said, it is a fantastic node, and if you can stomach the dump into ferocity, the stat dump into ferocity, if you don't want to go into toughness or agility, I think it's really, really good. But it'll also depend on your setup. Now, in my setup, I tend to use skills that will allow me to cast them and apply dots very rapidly without me having to shoot a bunch of times. I can just kind of set it and forget it. So I don't really need attack speed in my builds, and my build is also set up to kind of run away and be kind of cowardly, so I don't really need a lot of toughness right now either. So now that we've kind of gone over the ways to scale this thing, I want to talk about finally what I would probably recommend for setting it up. And this is pretty simplistic, but what I would probably say is for your ferocity wisdom dump, I would keep these even. And I know we've talked about the actual amounts, you know, and how big of a deal they are. I want to kind of show you guys what I mean by that when we talk about this is the most basic part of your setup, and that is going to be these diminishing returns. So these are the formulas that I'm pretty sure they're right. So critical chance is basically going to be your score divided by your score. So whatever your ferocity score is, plus 35 times your current level. So whatever your current level is. Now with crit, it's a little bit special. So if I go back in here, we can see that my wisdom, my ailment chance is 2.8%. We can see that my crit chance is 5%. Now they use the exact same formula, but you wouldn't know that because 69 and 69, you see 5%. Now that is because on ferocity for crit chance, it actually has a floor that it can go to, and that floor is 5%. So going back into our spreadsheet, we see that basically, oh, don't want to do that. We can see that the max is going to be 5% no matter what. After that point, this section right here is the exact same as ailment chance. So once you hit the amount where you would go above 5%, which is, you know, it's like 109 or something. I don't remember the exact amount. We can actually see where it happens. So let me go ahead and bring it back up. We can see our score is 69, 69. If I go to, let's see, I think nope, it's a little bit higher than that. So it's 129, I think, is where it goes. So yeah, 128 and 129. So if I come up here and I go to, let me dial it down, so 5% still. Now if we go up here, you're actually 129, you're at 5.1. So just to demonstrate that a little bit more, I'm going to plug in some more points here. 279, 279, 10.4%. 10.4%. So they actually use the same exact formula, except crit has a floor of 5%. I thought that was worth noting. So your first few points into ferocity, if you don't put many points into ferocity, are just not worth it. If you're not above like 129, it's literally not worth anything for you to invest into crit chance. So keep that in mind. After that, they scale the same speed as ailment. Now, agility scales a little bit differently. We can see it's actually score minus your level divided by score plus 24 times level. What this actually ends up being is if you don't have anything invested into agility, you don't get anything. Agility is 0% bonus attack speed if you have not put a point in, and it immediately starts getting value if you do. So just keep in mind, agility is, you literally get nothing if you do not invest into it. Now, that being said, let's go ahead and take a look at our curves. So right here we can see that this is the growth rate of all the stats. The red is attack speed, so you'll notice attack speed scales a little bit less, but roughly at the same speed as the others. So yes, it is just straight up lower on the graph, but it scales pretty okay. It looks like maybe if I extended it way out, maybe it catches up. Now additionally, you'll see a little tail here. That's that crit percentage where it's a minimum of 5%. So the blue line can't go below 5%. And then we also look at our deltas. Now our deltas are going to be pretty much identical for ailment and crit because they follow the exact same pattern after 5%. But notice that agility has a higher spike. And it's slightly higher on the curve. So there's slightly less diminishing returns, and it spikes a little bit better than the other ones do. So this spike is just basically like your first few points are worth a lot. And this is also based on my current level. So the reason, and this is the whole point for me showing you guys this, is the fact that I could invest, you know, a full 1,000 points into wisdom, or I can invest, you know, 500 into both, and I'd end up about here for crit chance and ailment chance. Now, there's also other factors like, do you have any bonuses to your ailment chance? Do you have any bonuses to your crit chance? And all of those things are really important too. But just keep in mind, if you're hitting 2,000 to 2,500 wisdom, or crit chance or anything really, you're going to get a lot less return for your buck with those last 200, 300 points, and you could probably be sitting at a very respectable amount of the other stat, or even toughness or agility or whatever. So just keep that in mind. Stats are pretty important in this game. Build how you want to build. Just know that a full-on stat dump isn't as good as most people are saying. So now we come to, I guess, the interesting portion of the segment, and that is what would I recommend you build towards? So there's two things I want to cover here: your beginner skill tree and your skill / weapon setup. So the first thing that I want to look at is the skill tree, and first thing we're going to go into ailment damage right here, and we're in the scholar section. I'm actually going to go for the cooldown decrease for all skills. I'm going to skip this 12% damage node. It is highly diminished, and we're getting a lot of big nodes. You're going to see that, a lot of big ailment nodes. So this is going to be diminished a lot more than it looks like already. So we're going to go ahead and grab this 8%. That's simply a travel node because we need to get in here to this ailment chance. So we're getting the elemental and the material portion. Now the material is for bleeds and poisons. The elemental is going to be for your shocks and burns. Now we're not going to grab the occult one. We don't really need a super high amount of curse stacking because eventually we're going to have the ability to very reliably apply those. And then we're going to grab the overall ailment chance score right here. Moving on from there, we're going to grab this node just to travel, and we're going to come down here. Now, after you get to this point, you're going to have to make some decisions on traveling. Now, probably the best decision is going to be come over here, grab this ailment chance, grab the max stacks, and then get this node. This is going to apply 2 extra ailment stacks whenever you apply an ailment. Now notice it also says 30% decrease to damage that does not deal damage over time. So that will not affect our ailment damage at all. As a side note though, any of these other nodes, like if you look at Archeon's teachings, it says minus 50% to all projectiles damage. Remember, we don't get any bonuses to projectile damage. We also don't take that penalty. We do not take any of the negatives unless it is specifically for all damage or if it is for ailment damage. So keep in mind, if you see something like this node that you kind of want to take but you're worried about the damage component, if you're mainly ailment based and you're not dealing damage with your direct hits, and it's actually the burns, the damage over time, this node doesn't hurt you at all. It does not hurt you at all. So going from there, we can go ahead and grab this ailment stack duration, and then we're actually going to kind of move on from this section for a while. Some of these nodes are, like this node right here, we're going to be going towards next, but just to make it a little bit more efficient, we're actually going to head up this direction. So we're going to grab ailment damage, we're going to grab this ailment damage, which is 50%, contrast that to that 12%, also decreases damage that is not damage over time. We're going to grab this 12% ailment damage as a travel node, and then we're going to go over here, grab a big chunk of ailment stack duration. So these are the only 2 ailment stack duration nodes. They're very strong for what they are, for the investment required, and they're going to make your dots last over twice as long. Come over here, grab Power of the First Men. This is going to give you a 50% chance to multiply your ailment stacks whenever you apply them. So over here, we're applying 3 stacks of ailment every time, 1 plus the 2 from this skill. Over here, we're doubling it, or at least that's a 50% chance. With these 2 nodes, it's a 100% chance. So we're always going to be applying at minimum 6 ailments whenever we apply 1 ailment. Now over here, we're going to go ahead and grab this and grab Grievous Afflictions. So hits can usually only apply 1 ailment type. Now it can do 2. So this is really, really big for us. What that means is you can use 1 skill with one hit and apply bleed and poison or fire and shock. This is a really big node. These are all going to be the cornerstone of your early game. Now from there, we have a couple decisions that we can make. What I would personally recommend is rotate your tree so that the Time Weaver is over here, and we're going to go ahead and come down here, grab these max ailment stacks, go through Dire Juncture, grab more ailment stacks, and then from here, you've kind of gotten your core set up. From here, you're going to have to make some decisions. Now, personally, I don't see why you wouldn't go into crit. Crit's going to be the stronger of the options. Now, that being said, if you are using your build setup to actually apply statuses but deal a bunch of on-hit damage, you're probably not going to want all of these nodes, right? You don't need all these nodes. This is truly a setup for if you are trying to be a pure dot build. Now from here, there's a lot of status chance nodes that apply to all of your statuses here. So we're probably going to want these. And then from there, you're probably going to want the crit. Now, if you don't, I can understand that. And then finally, let's talk about Immortal Offering. So what is Immortal Offering and why is it amazing? Killing an enemy that is afflicted with ailments gives you a temporary damage increase buff. That's really weirdly worded, but basically what it does is whenever you kill an enemy, you gain 5% damage of whatever ailment type they had. So if they have a burn on them, for instance, it gives you a 5% fire damage buff for every stack. Now, it maxes out at 5 stacks per damage type. But we already know that we apply 6 status stacks per application. So every time we apply one and we kill an enemy, we will always be getting the maximum Immortal Offering stacks. Now the reason why this is so good is because it actually increases our overall damage. It gives you a temporary damage increase buff. It is multiplicative, and that's very rare for this game so far, and actually getting a 25% damage multiplication. And it's also going to be the source of a little bit of difficulty with our gear and skill setup, but it is very, very worth it. Now the spell damage is kind of going to go to waste. These 2 points are kind of bad to take, but Immortal Offering is a multiplier, and it is far and away worth the investment. Now I usually come over here and grab the crit chance setup right here. It's a little bit, but it's something. Now this is going to be the overall core. That's all your damage. Like there's more damage on the tree, but this is 90% of your damage that you're going to get from your passive tree, pretty much, period. Like this is your core setup in any sort of status build where you're trying to apply all 4 statuses at once. Now, how do we actually apply those statuses? That's a big question. So applying a status is based on the amount of damage that you deal. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and equip all of my my armor again. It's kind of slow for whatever reason. I say for whatever reason. It's their servers are pretty bad right now, to be honest. So if I look at Death Gaze or Railgun, you can see that I apply shock and poison on these. Now how does that work? Well, your weapon, whatever is on your pistol or your dagger or your sword, whatever it is, you're going to have a physical damage component, and then you're going to have other types of damage. Now you're going to want to find a combination of skills and weapon that will allow you to apply all 4 damage status types with only 2 skills. Now I think this is really important if you want to have defensive skills or utility skills in your setup. If you don't have those, it's going to be very difficult for you to actually in-game increase your damage or survive certain affixes that you go up against on a map. So what I have chosen to do in this instance is I take a physical weapon and I made sure that it had toxin damage. Now remember that toxin damage doesn't actually increase my poison damage. All it is doing is making sure that my attacks that I deal have the poison status type. All I need is for them to have poison status type. If I take this pistol off, you'll actually see that I don't deal any physical damage, and that's because all of your attack skills are based on your weapon. Also notice that the physical damage amount that I get from this doesn't increase my damage over time either. It is not based on anything that your weapon does. It is purely based on your level times all of your sort of multipliers. So going from there, you'll also notice that these are a little bit lower than you saw at the beginning of the video, and that's because we haven't applied all of our statuses or all of our points yet. So if I apply all those, you're going to see we're roughly at the same amount. So from there, we kind of have our attack section set up. I need to pick any attack that has a base element type. Now this can be, it can be toxin, it can be bleed, it can be any of the damage types that you want it to be. Now once you have that, you need to find a way on your weapon to apply an additional type. So the railgun deals shock damage by default, so I've chosen to take a weapon with toxin damage. Now, toxin damage is going to basically be a very long-lasting ability, as well as the lightning, which is less important. So you can kind of tell that my railgun isn't used quite as much as my other dots, and that's because lightning and poison I don't have to apply as often, and lightning isn't as important. So what I really want to do is I want to make sure that solar fall can really be my AoE clear and my big damage dealer, because I can stack bleeds all day with this thing, and it's AoE to begin with, so I'm going to be applying massive cleaving AoE burn stacks all over the place. Now I have a bunch of other skills. All the other ones are utility. Look for things like anomaly, where it groups enemies, but it also has stuff like increases damage inflicted by ailments to enemies inside the vortex. You have stuff like where you can do it multiple times. You have 2 of them, and it also has another ailment damage to increase enemies. You have stuff for like Dusk Shroud, where you can say increases your dodge chance or inflicts curse on enemies that are inside the smoke. Things like that that'll allow you to either clear your ailments, to increase invisibility duration. There's other stuff where you can remove crowd control effects. Look for utility in your other skills. If you can combine all of your dots into 2 skills, you can get a ton of utility in your other stuff. So I think that's going to cover it for how the build sort of functions. Actually, as an aside, notice my sockets. I forgot to mention that. I have rend damage added to spells. So I convert my Solar Fall into Sacred Fire damage, and then I make it static recast. So basically, I can just do that and run away. I can reposition it if I want to. When I get too much rage built up, I'll throw out a railgun. So interesting aside too. This is like a little secret I found, but if you actually take this combination of runes, where you leave a trail and you have area of effect of each charge expands outward rather than inward, and then you take grants an additional charge, you can actually make it to where your shot on the very first shot will apply your fire trail. So all of this fire trail constantly applies dots, as well as this constantly applies dots, as well as this constantly applies dots. I'm not saying to copy this. What I'm saying, look for these abilities and look for interesting ways that they work, because they don't always work just the way you think, and sometimes it can seem pretty limited in the scope of the game, but there's some really cool stuff out there. So I think that's going to do it for the video. As always, if I have missed anything or misrepresented anything, please let me know in the comment section below, and thank you for watching this really long video that I have kind of droned on and on about stats and other stuff. I love doing this, and I love, helping people that are looking for these kind of answers. So thanks for watching, guys. See you in the next one.